everybody. We're talking about WordPress, and I got my whole little series on WordPress, but I need to back up a little bit, and so I think I'll put this at the beginning of my playlist. But anyways, just so you know, we're going to talk about a CMS. Okay, WordPress is a CMS, and what is a CMS? Well, you have it right here. This is a great, from hermodesign.com, a great infographic on what is CMS. Okay, so you have a little graphical representation. Before we talk about it, let's just define it right here. And a content management system is a web application. That means it's a program, and it's hosted on the web as opposed to something you install on your computer. Okay, and it makes content authoring and content delivery easy, and that's true. It enables even non-technical users to efficiently build a website, streamline the web publishing procedures, and quickly deploy them, creating a content-rich website. All right, so that's what a content management system is. All right. And so here's kind of the breakdown of what it is. Now, from one perspective, and some people might argue with me about the terms I'm using, there is, when you're talking about a CMS like WordPress, and in this case, we're just going to treat this right in the center as WordPress. And this would be the tool that you installed, that you can make edits to, and things like that. You have what's called the front end and the back end. The front end is what the public sees, and the back end is what those who manage the site see. So if you can log in and you're an administrator, you can get to the back end, okay? Now, one of the things in this particular class that I'm teaching in applied web design, I'm teaching you to be a designer and a developer. So you actually fit in this little circle here as people that you're going to be, you're going to be creating you're working already on a child theme for a WordPress site, and you're going to eventually develop a theme for it. And because you're going to be working on it, you're going to be working on the back end. You'll be a designer and developer. However, we also have business users. So if you're making a website for a client, your client would be that business user. It's the company that runs it, right? Not only that, but usually that company wants people to manage the site, the content, and administering the site, like figuring out what plugins you need and things like that. Those would be the authors and editors. Okay. So in the case of the project I was working on, IPM Advancement, I was helping out with them. I was the designer developer, and then I was working for a gentleman who was the marketing director. He was working on authoring the new site and creating content for it. Now, he may very well give accounts for other people in his company, his organization, I should say, to work on editing the site. Okay, but either way, any of these three are on the back end. In other words, they can log in and they can make changes to the content. Now, on the opposite side is the front end, and those are the people that are accessing the WordPress site. However, WordPress sites and other content management systems don't just deliver to people. Okay, and you'll see in just a moment. You might access the content management system on a website, on like a desktop computer, or you might be using an iPhone or some smartphone, an Android or a Droid or whatever. You might be accessing it from an iPad or a tablet. You might be interacting through email. In fact, some people will set up a WordPress site and they'll create a system that actually will automatically send out emails when there's a post. There's a plugin called MailChimp. And there's a program called MailChimp that allows companies to send mass emails to all the people that have signed up for accounts. And so it automates directly to email. Not only that, but social networking can be heavily involved. You can connect a WordPress site or another CMS to Facebook, to Twitter, to LinkedIn, etc. And there's lots of plugins that do that for you. Now you see here a breakdown at the bottom. It says the top industries that use CMSs. And it's all kinds of industries. And any industry that wants a web presence can make a WordPress site. But these are the most common ones you will find. Okay? So there's just the general overview of what a CMS is. Now, what I want to talk to you about is more the technology next. So when I told you about front end and back end, and I said some people might argue with my terms, the reason why is the next slide I'll show you is just a general view of the layers of a CMS. On a CMS, you're going to have three layers. One layer is the content. Another one would be the style, and the other would be the code or the structure. In the case of WordPress, the content is stored on a database, a MySQL database. And then the style would be like the CSS style sheets that you create, and usually through a theme. So if you create a theme for a WordPress site, that would be mostly style, but it would include some of the code as well. In fact, themes wrap the two together. So all the HTML that it outputs would be the code. So I like to view it as the data, the style, and the markup or the structure. So the code's really how it structures it. So let's take a look at a little deeper, at a little more detailed level that I've created this. So you see here, anatomy of a WordPress. I'll try to make it look nicer, but I just developed this today to put it into perspective. Okay, on the left, guys, in the very back end of, and this is true of any web application that uses data, and it's also true of WordPress sites and other content management systems, is there is a database that stores all the information that gets displayed. So if you go to a WordPress site, and let me go show you one of mine. Okay, here is my 100 Vision site. So this is a blog I've had for a long time, and I use it as a blog mostly. And I do a lot of teaching, and so I have teaching-related things here. Here's the latest post I did back in November called Dude, What's My User Agent? Now, the style you see here, the fonts, the colors, the layout, all that's done with the CSS. CSS is what's called front-end technology because it's what the user sees when they go to the site. So the user is at the front looking at the site. Okay, so that's the front end. So we're at the front. But not only that is there's content in here, right? Like, dude, what's my user agent? And then some paragraphs and code samples and a bulleted list. Okay, so what we have here is we have some structure to this. And the HTML represents the structure, and you probably already know that. But for example, here, this is probably a header level 2, and this is probably a paragraph, and then there's a horizontal rule or a border in between, and then these are defined as paragraphs. So that's the structure of it. But the actual text is the content. So the structure, the HTML, and the data, or I'm sorry, the structure and the style, like the fonts, the colors, the dressing, right? That's all front end. In fact, if you right-click on a page and you choose View Page Source, and you look at this, okay, anything you see here is a front-end technology. It's because the browser can see it. The browser gets it. That's on the front end. All you're going to see is HTML and some CSS being applied, possibly in a style tag. You might also have like an XML or some other language like that. But if the browser can view it and see it, we're still at the front end because a browser is a front end technology. Okay, so now let's go to edit this post, and now we're going to start viewing the back end. Okay, so now we're going to look under the hood, and we've talked about this already. This content right here, which is a header, is actually the title for this particular post. Okay, when I change this and I click update, what's going to happen, let's go back to this, is PHP is an interesting sort of go-between. I call it the go-between. And the PHP, what it is it sits on the server, and the server is a place, I think this one is hosted by GoDaddy or, no, Web Hosting Buzz, I think, is the server. And there's some computer that is storing all of my database, you know, over here. So there's a database created by MySQL, and then there's a set of files, and they are saved as .php. Well, these sit on the server, and the server will look at the PHP code and do something with it and send out HTML. But this is back-end stuff because PHP does not go out as PHP. It goes out as HTML. The PHP sits on the server. So let's look at that on the blog so you can see the content. There's one of my other little screenshots I was going to show you at some point. All right, so let's take a look at a thing called the editor. So let's look at the PHP. Okay, and so let's look at a PHP file such as the template that we are using. Actually, let's start by main index template, index.php. I can go in here if I wanted to. I don't like to use this window. I'd rather use FTP. But if I wanted to, I could go in here and I could add code. Now you see this right here? Get header. You're not going to see that on the page when you go to view the site. But if you notice, div ID equals primary is the first tag that's HTML you will see. And this get header is actually going to pull this file somewhere over here called header, if I can find it. There it is. And that's header.php. So one of the things you're going to find is a WordPress site actually combines multiple PHP files together. And each one will have some HTML, like a doc type, and then some PHP, like PHP body class. Anytime you see that, this is going to run a function, and that function is going to grab something from the database and pull it out and stick it in the HTML. So let's just focus on this one only. Body, PHP body class. Notice there's no attribute on the body tag. Well, let's go to the home page and let's look at the body tag on HTML. So I'm going to view the page source again. I'm going to go to the top, look for the head, or the body, I mean. And if you look here, body, look at all the class attributes values it has. Home, which means it's the home page. Blog, which means it's using blog posts. Logged in, admin bar, no customized support, layout. Okay, this stuff was stored on the database in some table somewhere. Okay, and the PHP ran the function, and somewhere was code that told it to go to the database, grab the information, and stick it right there. Okay, so that's how it all works together as a CMS. PHP goes between. It looks to see, it might actually have one file grabs another PHP file, and that might grab another one. And they might tap into the database and pull information out. Or if you click Save, Edit, Publish, it will actually take information and stick it into the database. So it goes back and forth and works in the database. But this database is protected from the outside world. It's back behind the scenes, sitting on a server. Hopefully that's on a server and it's protected, that the only person who can get in there is the person who would have the password and the username for that database. If you are a developer, you probably will have access to that unless someone gives it to you. Some people could work on a website, on a WordPress site, and touch the PHP and never touch the database. In fact, I make it a point never to touch the database. Okay? But the PHP is between those two. But either way, the content and the preprocessor, we call it a preprocessor because it processes, then it sends out. These two are back end. The rest is front end. And notice how I've attached the CSS to the HTML. So that's what's going on behind the scenes. And what we're trying to do is hide some of this information from people who do not need it and don't need to care about it. Okay? And the developers many times just focus on PHP. And then there's a lot of people on a WordPress site that might have an account that all they do is log into the whoa, that's really big. Let me change that. There we go. So they might just go into the dashboard and work on there. So technically speaking, if you're a content editor or an admin or something and you're on here, you're actually, technically speaking, I would say you're kind of at the back end of WordPress anyway. But you still might not be directly affecting the database. In fact, you should never directly affect the database for the most part, unless you really know what you're doing, but be careful. So that's about all all the time I have for this particular aspect. And the next time, I think I'll compare some of the content management systems that are out there and explain why I like WordPress. And then we'll go ahead and do all the other tutorials related to working with WordPress. But hopefully you now understand kind of the behind the scenes.